Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Arnis Luks here at the Crossroads, and I'd like to welcome Yves Potvin from Canada. Welcome, Yves.
Hello.
No worries. How's the weather in Canada, Yves?
You know what? It's melting. It's starting to thaw.
Okay.
There's still lots of snow, but it was raining today.
Mm-hmm.
It was a high of about 5.
Mm-hmm.
Yesterday was about 3. The next couple of weeks are going to be obviously around or above freezing, so we're going to lose a lot of that snow.
Yeah.
But don't hold your breath for no more snow because we've seen snow in April,
Okay.
even in May.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
not to be taken as an official weather report.
Okay. No worries. That's fine. Well, in Australia, in Adelaide in particular, autumn is here. The leaves are changing colour, and to me, summer has ended early. I think February was relatively cool. December was cool. January, yes, the heat was there and we had the bushfires, but we have bushfires all the time. Um, to me, it's about management of our forests and things like that, of which it seems as if the more authority the government have, the less they're able to actually govern effectively. They really are a basket case, and it demonstrates to me that giving them power is the wrong thing to do. The more we give power to government, the bigger the mess they make of it. And so to me, it's a demonstration of the nature of the human being, that they're not meant to have so much power, and they shouldn't have it, and it's actually destructive to them as a human being. And that actually brings us to the subject for today, regeneration. We're going to continue on. The nature of human beings and about power and service. And I understand that to me, service is an interesting perspective because government itself, the legitimacy of government, is around this principle of service, that they actually uphold the law, not like a sausage machine, continue to produce law after law after law like a totalitarian, but rather uphold the law and that the law is common. Everyone knows what the law is. That the function of government is to provide freedom and security. So security means security from want, a sufficiency. And of course our productive capacity is there. We can easily produce more than enough. And so the justification for government, if you like, the locus standi, the justification to speak for government is that they must ensure a sufficiency. And of course the government is doing the very opposite of that. They are actually shortening supply. They're making electricity, water, food, fuel, all these things more expensive. And so they're actually going against the very justification that they have for existence. And I think that that's very, very important, that especially Australia's constitution, the preamble, begins with "we the people." The constitution belongs to the people of Australia. It doesn't belong to the government. They are not God ordained to lead. If anything, as soon as they think they are, they become tyrants, and it shows with our leadership. It doesn't matter what institution, it shows with our leadership. So this principle of service, to me, is about natural law. It's about observing the great human frailties, the justification for government, and the security that is there if government was doing its job correctly, which it is not. And of course the locus standi, the justification for speaking. Now I notice in our backdrop we've got this picture of a beautiful church, and it's from, to me, the church that we're not hearing the trumpets that should be ringing out about this justification for government and the limits that should be imposed on governments. And we're not hearing it, and we should. Your thoughts, Yves?
Yeah, I just want to put a word on the church back there. It said that's the St. Joseph Chapel that we built after we built the ladies' house, the Michael House, and then we have the Immaculate House, and this one in memory of St. Joseph Oratory in Montreal. We built the Chapel of St. Joseph. It copied kind of the chapel that Brother Andre had built in the beginning.
Okay.
So that was before the oratory came out.
Hmm.
And so that you know, in the next in the past 2 months approximately, we have a gentleman who is renovating the whole chapel.
Oh,
I
beautiful.
mean, it was falling apart
Hmm.
because it hadn't been used, and the critters were getting at it. So he's doing a great job renovating inside and outside.
Hmm.
Last week he just put a new bell. Well,
Hmm.
it's the same bell, but with a new rope,
Okay.
and so we're gonna be able to ring it, and the whole probably the town will be able to hear a little bit of it. But anyway, it's
Beautiful.
just a I just thought I'd let you know that you may need a new picture, maybe in a few months. So coming back to our governments that don't really work for the people, we
Yeah.
know they work for. It was Anselm Rothschild,
Hmm.
uh, back whenever, and he said that you can talk to me about the people's constitution, their laws. He says I don't care. I says give me a town where I control the money, or a country where I control the money and create and control everything. And he says I do not care about their constitution.
Yeah.
So that was low of him.
Yeah.
But when I think about these elites that are trying to uh, put us under a totalitarian, like you
Hmm.
call it,
Hmm.
a totalitarian system, they're going to come down eventually. We know that.
Hmm.
And they do that. They're going to do that to themselves, but they might hurt a few people in the interim. But when you talk about systems, I'm talking about the communist system or
Yeah.
socialist system.
Hmm.
Uh, Man wasn't made for those systems. I
No.
mean, it's they weren't made to slave after those systems.
Yeah.
The system were invented to help the people, individuals, and that was put in our constitutions.
That's right.
And so they kind of ignore our constitution, our laws.
Hmm.
They just take over, and through the money system, they're able to control everything, including the media,
Yeah.
including our government,
Yeah.
and including, unfortunately, a good part of the church.
Mm.
So that's something that we really have uh, to know about. So the gospel this morning, not the gospel, but the epistle this morning in church was uh, Moses was given laws,
Yeah.
and we haven't followed these laws.
Yeah.
We've just pulled away from the natural law of Moses' law, where what we went by, and he didn't say, oh, for Jewish people we're going to lend money, and we're not going to charge interest for the Jews. No, he said we're not going to charge interest to your brother, which
Yeah.
means us, which means them,
Yeah.
and that has failed. The whole system has failed miserably.
Yeah. That's right. There's actually a a document. I think I've got it on our website. Um, I think I have Schwabi. It's called Usury and the Church of England. But I know that the Romans have got a lot of encyclicals on this same thing, and I think that it's really really important to consider that usury itself was a mortal sin, and the church has condemned it many times. It has condemned it, and the fact is that we've forgotten that it's a manipulation of a measuring system. Money itself is simply a measuring system of the goods and services that's available in the community. And with usury, of course, comes debt. And with debt, of course, comes power over people, power over governments, over nations, and to the point where there is power over the whole world because of this mortal sin. We've neglected it. Now, when I talked about the natural law before, and the justification for governments was to provide an environment of freedom that gives the individual opportunity to have security and to ensure that they have sufficiency. There's sufficiency. There's enough food and water for them. There's a home for them. There's a safe environment where they can live. Now, if government can't provide that, then that government is losing its justification even for existence. And so we've got to look at these things more deeply and realize that we come together as free individuals and we choose to form governments. We choose to actually set up constitutions and set up infrastructure and communities and cities and nations. We choose to do that. And on the basis that we choose to do that, there are objectives that we want from it. And these objectives are all to do with freedom. And if we can't achieve those objectives, then we've got to again look at mechanisms. A look at mechanisms. Now, a constitution was a mechanism for its time. It was a mechanism for its time to limit the power of government, and laws are there. They're a mechanism in their time to provide an environment where if people obey the law, like Moses, they obey the law, then life is pleasurable. But right now it's not, because law has become a tyrant in itself, and government has become a tyrant in itself. And of course all of these things stem from our neglect to condemn the power of usury, where it has control over all things. Governments, institutions, individuals are indebted. You know, you look at the world clock, you look at the individual debt for each person, and they have to go to work. They're basically a wage slave for their whole life because it's been neglected. This mortal sin has been neglected, and it should have been challenged, and it hasn't been. So yes, there is a lacking voice, but at the same instance with freedom comes responsibility. And so I suggest that the individual is as equally culpable as we may direct towards the church. We challenge the church, but so is the individual, because the individual doesn't have anarchy, freedom with no responsibility. What they've got is freedom with responsibility. So they have the ability to respond, but they have a moral obligation to respond, and that means they have to participate. And again, it's called on the individual to again participate in what's going on. Find a mechanism that will actually bring government to order and that will bring finance to order. And I believe that mechanism, we call it social credit. Douglas, social credit. Your thoughts, Yves?
Yes, social credit is the answer. Economic democracy, if you want to call it that way, to make it easier for some people have itchy ears, and the social credit, they attach that to something evil, of course. But the elites have organized their machine, their scheme, in a way that it reminds me a little bit of the mafia system.
Mm-hmm.
The mafia goes into a city and they take over a few main streets where businesses are kind of thriving, and they go by each business and it says, and they make trouble there, and then the other person comes in and says, if you want to be protected, I'll protect you, but you'd have to give me, $500, $1,000 a week. So when I come, you pay me and I'll protect you. So when you look at the banking system, it's no different. Mm-hmm. It's no different. They just ask in a way where everybody is organized. They're friends. Well, I wouldn't call them friends. I would call them pawns that organize the whole thing. And they do it through the little banks on the corner with smiles and a tie. And they tell the people, we're going to help you with this. And they put the person in debt. That's a way of, look at the money that we owe mm-hmm. to nobody.
Yeah.
They say we owe it to China, and China owes to us, and United States. It's a giant scheme, and we've arrived at that.
Yeah. And
the taxes is our slavery. We have to pay those taxes, and the taxes. I tell people all the time, taxes, believe it or not, do not go to pay for services. They go to pay for the debts that we have that we don't owe, the fraudulent debt that the government has taken with these private banks.
Yep.
So it's no wonder that I was talking to you earlier about before we got on about nursing homes,
Yeah.
and that's just one place that I'm mentioning. Nursing homes in Australia. I was watching a video, and they were putting like little cameras here and there because he had heard some complaints,
Hmm.
and the poor people that are in those rooms, I mean, they're mistreated from every angle.
Yeah.
They're mistreated from the residents, the patients, the PSWs, and they all kind of war at each other during their daily work.
Yeah.
And the bottom line is they are not given proper care because there is no money.
Hmm.
There's no money. We cannot hire a nurse for this floor because it would cost too much. So they hired PSWs or assistant nurses that don't even exist anymore.
Hmm.
Assistant nurses and nurses, you only have to have one,
Yeah.
and that's in a nursing home. Retirement homes that need assistance, they don't have nurses. They have a PSW or an assistant nurse kind of thing.
Yeah.
So because the answer is there's no money,
Yeah.
and I mean, and the government can only make so many decisions, and they make stupid decisions.
Hmm.
We had a our prime minister, not prime minister, but the premier of Ontario
Yeah.
decided, and I never knew this. They decided to change the license plates to put them a blue color.
Hmm.
So by putting no indentation in the, you have a raised
Yeah. Raised face. Yeah.
letter,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I guess he wanted to save money. He
Hmm.
says we'll make it blue. We'll put a few things on there like "Welcome to Ontario" or whatever, and then they leave the letter whites. So I see some people. I said, "Gee, I never heard that they were going to do that,"
Hmm.
and so it turns out that they cannot see them at night. The cameras and all that cannot see them at night. So they recalled 49,000 license plates to be replaced with our original blue on white colors.
Yeah.
But this is just to mention to everybody that you can look at every facet of our society. There's no money for this. There's no money for that. I mean, these people are just not trying to help us. They must hate people. They must hate their brothers because they're not willing to do anything for the people. And we can see the terrible things that are happening in our society, and the poor people are left behind. The poor is getting poorer.
Yeah.
There's many more poors. Look at California. Look at San Francisco, New York, all those places.
That's right. Yeah.
Adelaide, probably they have all kinds of homeless people. A lot of people call them tent cities all over the place. I just watched a few videos on that, and the government doesn't know what to do. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? And they don't have the money. So all they can do is cut services, sell buildings.
Hmm.
There is no money available.
Hmm.
I mean, can we talk to these people and say, listen, there is a better solution?
That's right.
But they won't listen.
Yeah.
I can try. I can try. I've seen them before.
I believe.
I talked.
Yeah. I believe you've got to continue trying, Yves, because the fact is that the Douglas social credit proposal ensures a sufficiency of money so that all those nurses who could be gainfully employed in that industry can be paid, and that the nursing homes will have a sufficiency, that the patients, there will be a sufficiency. I mean, these things are resolvable. Don't think they're not. It's to do with financial policy, and it's to do with credit creation. This power of banks to create money out of nothing and then claim it as their own. It's actually the communities. It's individuals in the communities that are actually doing the work. And so it's like running two orbits at the same time. One is the economic system, and the second orbit is the financial system, and they're not married into each other. They're not the same. And with the Douglas social credit proposal, the two systems are placed in equilibrium so that what you can physically do becomes financially possible. That's what it's about. You don't have to go into debt in order to provide an adequate service in nursing homes. You hire the individuals. There's enough money in the system to pay for the individual so that they can actually what do we call it? Service those in aged care. They can service them. They can provide a service. Now this to me is so critically important. This thing called finance. Douglas saw it 100 years ago. He wrote the book Economic Democracy. I would encourage you to go to the League Library and have a look. Economic Democracy. He wrote it 100 years ago. And it really is prophetic because Douglas was responsible for implementing automation. He was responsible. He was actually analysing the Farnborough, I think it was Farnborough, Farnborough Air Base, the actual cost of production and what was going out in wages and dividends. He analysed a further 100 companies to ensure that his thesis was sound. The A plus B theorem is a thesis.
Yeah.
And he substantiated it by looking at the books of 100 different companies, and it was always the same. The costs going out were disproportionate to the wages and dividends. There was always a deficiency, so that people could not buy what was being made. So the orbit of the financial system is deliberately shortened, and this is what banks are doing. They're shortening it. They're shortening a sufficiency of purchasing power as policy. Now, government, the justification for government is to provide an environment of sufficiency. It's to provide an environment of security, of the ability of people confidently to plan their future. And it's got to the point, here we are, an age of abundance, an age of automation, and there is no security at all. There's no security of employment, of tenure if you are employed. There's no security for a future of being able to have a family, of buying a home. There's no security in a sense of one country discussing the surpluses that they have, the natural surpluses that they have that they could trade with. It's all competition. It's all economic warfare. And this is all because of this orbit of finance which is separate from the economics, and they need to be brought in equilibrium. Douglas saw it. And what we're proposing, ladies and gentlemen, what we're proposing is to run the experiment. Run the Douglas social credit experiment. They're doing it with the basic income as a tax base. Well, we're suggesting the national dividend be an issue of new credits. If there are inflationary pressures, where new credits come into the economic system, then the consumer price discount offsets those inflationary pressures. This was tried in the 40s, and it was proved successful. That stable items, food, milk, bread, flour, things like that, they had a consumer price subsidy, a consumer price discount that offset any inflationary pressures. And these are the two mechanisms that Douglas came up with 100 years ago with the economic democracy, with writing it, in order to place the financial system into the same orbit as the economic system, so that what is physically possible becomes financially possible. This is what it's about. It comes back to the power of banks, this thing called usury, and Schwabi, SW. Look at it on our website, Schwabi, usury in the Church of England. And I know that the Catholic encyclicals are exactly the same. They condemn it. Historically, the Church has condemned. And here we are, we wonder why we're in such disarray. It's because we have defied natural law. We've gone against it. We've placed too much power in the hands of individuals, and they are corrupted by it. And they essentially are criminal elements, and they're running our whole systems. And we've got to actually rethink again. We've got to place power back at the feet of the individual. That's what the national dividend does. It places an economic vote in your hands. Run the experiment. It's time to do it. We've wasted 100 years going around in circles, revolving, instead of actually thinking that, hang on, there is a solution. Let's run the experiment. Your thoughts, Eve?
You're right. The only thing is, uh, 1950, I think it was, Pope Pius XII
Mm-hmm.
was asked this very question.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, what do you think of social credit?
Mm-hmm.
And Pope Pius XII went on to say it would be an enlightenment for individual. It would help them become better by themselves.
Yeah.
It would better their lives and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not as if the church never had the instructions to do it. It's just like the elites are not letting it go. So every popes the last 300-400 years denounced the banking systems,
Yeah.
all those systems that are controlling the world,
Yeah.
and they were told. And but you go see a priest. I hate to say, I talked to a lot of priests, and funny enough, the priests from places like Uganda, Ivory Coast, and those people, we talked to them. So, that's fantastic. Let's get together and let's learn about this.
Mm-hmm.
And hundreds, if not thousands, of them have now gotten involved in the fight towards adopting social credit, trying or at least learn about social credit
Mm-hmm.
to implement it in our country. Because
Yeah.
they're poor, and we have poor here too. I mean, United States, Australia, we have lots of poor here. People don't know where the next meal is going to come from
Mm-hmm.
in a apparently developed country.
Yeah.
That's not justice.
No.
That's why I call it. That's why I call it justice and peace,
Yeah.
not development and peace. That was changed over.
Mm-hmm.
But again, the popes have denounced the system, but our clergy hasn't listened,
Yeah.
because there are people in there like I hate to say it, but they're Freemasons right in the church.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and they keep an eye on people like the Knights of Columbus and the clergy,
Mm-hmm.
and there's also the places like science people that they know what's going on apparently,
Mm-hmm.
and so they'll put a kind of a watchdog into our church so nothing advances.
Yeah.
I would like to talk to Knights of Columbus
Mm-hmm.
and tell them this is what we should do,
Mm-hmm.
but there's going to be one in there, two maybe,
Mm-hmm.
that might be connected with Freemasonry,
Yeah.
and will automatically, oh, the guy is a communist, he's a socialist,
Mm-hmm.
don't even listen to him, and the people would just give up and say, oh, okay, I never knew, yeah, sounds like socialism or something.
Mm-hmm.
But this is what we're stuck with.
Mm-hmm.
Henry Ford was probably a social creditor himself
Yeah.
without knowing social credit.
Yeah.
Because I think he said in the early 1900s, I don't know if he said it after he knew C.H. Douglas, but he said things like a bond is money. A bond is actual wealth. The government writes a bond,
Mm-hmm.
and so they should just turn it into money. Don't turn it over to the private banks and and monetize it by making loans,
Mm-hmm.
but monetize it yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there are lots of people that adopted this idea, but again, they have watchdogs. The Freemasons have watchdogs all over the place,
Mm-hmm.
and this is the mafia that I'm telling you about. The Freemasons keep an eye, and they're the gatekeeper kind of thing,
Mm-hmm.
and they keep things hidden from the people, and they put sticks in the wheels all the time.
Mm-hmm.
If something is good, then they'll put a stick right in there, and then you stop it. So people are not being told the truth about what's going on.
Yeah.
So we really have to educate the people and say once and for all, no, you've got to listen to me. I mean, I'm sick and tired of saying, oh yeah, I'll read about it,
Mm-hmm.
and now I'm putting my foot down a little longer, and I'm trying to make them understand. I read yesterday, or I heard something yesterday about, no, I listened to a video, actually, one of our videos from one of the sessions we had in 2010 or something like that. And The person that went to Australia was Pierre Machildon.
Mm-hmm.
Pierre Machildon was a full-time pilgrim that went there. He died in 2008. And somebody reminded us that there was another pilgrim that was very, very efficient. And he traveled to Australia. You heard about him. And he traveled all over the world. He went to Africa. He went to Poland, England. He went to France. He was bilingual. So he was able to talk to the people and organize meetings wherever he went. I went with him with a few meetings in Chicago, Cleveland, and places like that. So, and there was some fighters there, but we didn't keep the fight going for some reason, or we got sidetracked because of those people that are putting the stick in the wheels.
Yeah, no, that's a very, very important observation, Yves, that that there are people in certain critical positions who will white ant what's going on, and that's why the call for this modern age is to the individual. It's actually to the individual to empower themselves and to have their own personal relationship with God and if you like, bring about God's kingdom on earth as it is in heaven. Now, I'm just going to cut across, I'll lose your audio for a sec here. I'm going to cut across to the ALOR website, the Australian League of Rights. This is our library. And I just wanted to point out that here is Schwabe, Usury in the Church of England. Okay, so that's an Anglican document. But the fact is that the encyclicals, I've got half a dozen or so encyclicals here. Rera Novarum is very important. Quadragesimo Anno is there as well. These are very, very important encyclicals. And also, if we go down to the bottom, there's Grand Orient Freemasonry Unmasked, which shows you the insidious nature of it. And so they're not easy reading. In actual fact, they're quite difficult to actually sort of get your head around that would organised evil be so wicked? But yes, it is. And finally, I'd like to draw your attention to Geoffrey Walker, D.Q. Walker, 10 Advantages of a Federal Constitution, and equally important is the People's Law. The People's Law, which is Citizens' Initiative Referenda. Now, what I'm suggesting that you consider in these things is that federalism is very important. Now, Canada is a federalist state, and that is that the provinces, it's a federalist country, sorry, the provinces have certain amounts of power, and those levels of power that the provinces have been usurped by the federal government. We have exactly the same problem in Australia, and that is that the states, the power of finance which the states handed over through the Loans Council to the federal government was the emasculation of the states, and it's something that needs to actually come back and needs to be revisited. Australia needs to look again at these state banks and the ability of banks to issue credits, debt-free credits to the states so the states can function. But this is where Douglas social credit comes into its own, because it's not just the state issuing credits to itself as if you like a national socialism. It's individual. It's individual. The credit needs to go to the foot of the individual, not the state. The power needs to reside in the state. Otherwise, you're only handing more, if you like, more totalitarianism to the state. You've actually got to undo the power of the state. You've got to deconstruct it. And that's why the national dividend consumer price discount is so vital. But also, you've got to consider that government is a servant. It's not a tyrant. It's not a tyranny. Government is a servant. And in order to control government, we've got to consider a new mechanism. Now, constitutions is essentially a relatively modern outworking of this consideration. It started, if you like, with the signing of the Magna Carta, where the barons compelled the king, sign or die, one or the other, sign or die. And to me, this is the position where we find ourselves in with governments, is that governments, Australia, the evolution of governments is one where the people decided over a period of constitutional conventions. Over 10 years they argued They argued and debated, and then finally this is how it's formed. This is the agreement that the people of Australia made. But the fact is that the government tyrants, the hidden hand, has been working to deconstruct our constitution for over 100 years. And it's got to the point where now even the High Court is actively deconstructing our constitution. Now, what we've got to do is say, well, okay, this is where we are in time and space. We've got to come up with new mechanisms to place government back into the position that it should be, of servant to the people, of providing an environment where each individual is secure, that there is a sufficiency of material goods, that they have enough food and water, that they have a home, and that they are safe. This is the purpose or the justification to have government. And so we've got to look on this whole thing once again and actually fight for our freedoms. We have to. Because if we don't, then totalitarianism, a darkness is going to come over the whole world. It's the people in the free world, the West. We're still free enough to work this thing through. We've got to use our institutions. We've got to use not only our voting rights, but our public, if you like, our public resistance against tyrannical government. Now, Douglas wrote about this in a book called Social Credit. In 1924 he wrote that book called Social Credit. And in it, I think it's around page 126, he wrote about the critical moment, about pursuing a policy that will change the course of events. And that policy, the national dividend, the consumer price discount, this is a financial policy based on the philosophy of freedom. Douglas was quite profound in what he saw 100 years ago, and he wrote it 100 years ago. And it's up to us to look at these problems that we face, the problems of today, and ask ourselves, is there a solution? Is there something out there that can actually respond to it? I believe there are many solutions, and each community has to find their own. But the fact is, if individuals do nothing, then for sure, the totalitarianism is going to come over the whole world. So we can't do nothing. We have to do everything we possibly can to look for mechanisms, look for systems that will actually overcome the tyranny of today. Now, Yves, it's nearly 38 minutes. We're into this. We're certainly soaked up the time, so I'm going to...
Very interesting.
It is. Very interesting. I'll call for closing comments if you like, please, Yves.
Okay, I'd just like to mention that we have the tools. We just came out last year with a leaflet in English called The Dividend, and how it can be applied. And we also have a financial system, an efficient financial system. And on the second page, it shows the golden calf.
Yeah.
And the bankers are pointing at it and say, "There's your God. You go to work now." The golden calf. And then we have, of course, the real rulers of this world. And then we have a fourth one, and it's called the impressions of the African clergy. They're not only Africans. There's some in France. They're a little bit all over the world, and they gave what they thought of the last 10 years of sessions that they've participated in. And we've had hundreds of priests, hundreds of bishops, archbishops, and cardinals. Yeah. And they're in that book, and they talk about how wonderful social credit, the economic democracy of C.H. Douglas, could be worked into our system. Now, it's only a matter of getting it to the people.
Yeah.
We have to get it hand in hand. When I'm going to go tomorrow. I got a town I got to go to.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go to businesses, and I'm going to give it in the people's hand one at a time. So I'm sorry, this is the only way we can do it.
Yeah.
The media, I asked the media if they wanted to put it in their paper. They won't.
Yeah.
Even if it's the truth.
Yeah.
They won't put it in the paper.
No.
So I come to you
Mm-hmm.
out of, you can call it charity if you want. That's what I believe it is. It's
Mm-hmm.
a little bit to be charitable towards your neighbor.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm giving you the information here. Oh, great, you know.
Yeah.
And nobody really says, out of here, you weirdo. They all listen and they
Yeah.
say, that guy's got something. There's
Mm-hmm.
something interesting in what he said.
That's right.
And maybe they'll read it. Maybe they'll
Yeah.
read it. Maybe they'll. So basically, we're trying to get, at the same time, we're trying to get some money
Mm-hmm.
to be able to print, to buy more paper, ink, and so on and so forth. So
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, that's part of it. But I
Mm-hmm.
don't force them. I just tell them, if you see it in your heart that you can help us, then maybe you can give a little bit of a donation or something. So
Yeah.
sometimes it works, and we don't know what's going to happen with all these things all over the world. You know, we're
That's
all
right.
do a little part.
Yeah.
You never know what can happen.
That's right. Exactly. We don't know what's going to happen. I'm just going to do an advert for the Michael Journal here, Eve. I just went to the Michael Journal, michaeljournal.org, and I placed into the search engine, which is up here, type the keywords. I placed the word dividend into there. And it's interesting because I've got all of these results, and I think the national dividend is number 6, but you've got all of these results of very, very important documents that are there, and this is part of the service that the Michael Journal are doing for you. The Australian League of Rights are doing it for you so you can have the information to actually set you free, the information to release your communities, your nations from debt bondage. It's there. It's there if only you'd exercise it. But of course, the willing workers, the individual working in association, the individual deciding, that's right, we have to do something, and now is the time to do it. Now is the critical moment. And now is the critical moment. It is time to run the experiment called Douglas Social Credit. Yves Potvin, thank you so much for today. It's been a
Okay,
beaut forum,
it's
and
been my pleasure.
no worries. It's always lovely to have you. Thank you, ladies and
We'll do it
gentlemen.
again, eh?
We certainly will.